Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Hopefully, yes. It is officially afternoon, so welcome to our HR webinar featuring Miss Ann Hogan. We are talking about staying power for staff, the importance of stay versus exit interviews in staff retention. Real quick, I do want to give Ann the introduction she so much deserves. I'd like to introduce Ann. Some of you may already know her or recognize her. She's an amazing woman that we've worked with at the PCA many times. However, this proper introduction is fitting. For many years, Ann has worked in HR, mostly as VP of HR, through which she has gained extensive knowledge and experience. Her passion is on helping managers and organizations exceed and succeed when it comes to their people. Her extensive education has resulted in Ann holding her SPHR, her SHRM/SCP, and her Master's in Education, with a focus on performance and change in organizations. Like me, Ann loves to travel, experience new cultures, and she's even climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, so that's pretty cool. Now, on that note, I will turn it over to Miss Ann Hogan.
Thank you, Courtney. This is so fabulous to be doing this for Wyoming Primary Care Association. If you could just give me a thumbs up so I can see that you can actually hear me, that would be great. Fantastic. As we get going, I just want to tell you a little bit about Zoom. If you're not familiar with Zoom, down at the bottom, if you hover down at the very bottom of your screen, if you can maybe see my hover, I don't know. If you see that, you may be able to put something in the chat. And we will open it up for questions at the end because we have a small group and that's how we learn, right? So we will be doing that in a little bit. But in the meantime, you've already heard about me. The important thing is that I've worked in health centers. I know health centers. I know what you guys are going through. I know how difficult this is. So, and how I have such respect for your work. But we want to talk about retention and strategy. And you can see those two words on there. And it encompasses all those other words make up what retention and strategy are. And part of that strategy will be stay interviews. But in order to figure that out, we're going to talk a little bit about your strategic planning because that's important when you're actually planning your stay interviews and why your stay interview should be an important piece of this. And I know strategic planning is big, right? But we're talking workforce here, and workforce is a large piece. In fact, I can almost guarantee that all of you, the biggest expense item on your, any expenses that you have is your payroll costs and benefit costs. So that's why it's important that you think of this strategically. And before we get started on that, we're going to talk about doing a SWOT analysis real quickly. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? And what are your threats? And that really falls into your stay interviews. Your stay interviews will tell you what are your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats when it comes to your own employees. And so that's why it's really important that you do stay interviews. And before that, though, I know your strategic planning, and I hope it's already done for 2020 now. But when we think about it, right, we have this competitive market. We all know it's a crazy market out there. But your strategy gives you direction as to where you're going to go and allows for you to plan on how you're going to get there. And if you're not doing something like a stay interview, you have no plan of how you're going to improve the culture of your organization. And more importantly, your strategic plan, your actual plan, keeps everyone focused, as does the stay interviews. When you do those, they're very similar in that sense. They're both big picture, right? Your workforce strategy and your strategy plan and your strategic plan is obviously a bigger document for your organization. But believe me, stay interviews can actually help with this whole situation. Keeps everybody focused on what you're actually going to be doing in the future to improve the culture or increase that retention with your staff. And of course, it always allows for maneuvering and flexibility at some level. But when it comes to your strategy for your staff, are you retaining the right people? That's a big question. Sometimes we retain people because they're there, right? And are we recruiting the right individuals, and are we having them in the right place? Those are all crucial questions to be asking yourself as you go through your strategy. And what we're going to talk about today is really retaining your individuals that are the right people. So we're going to talk much more in depth about that. But when you do a strategic plan or a workforce strategy plan, you're looking at a number of different things, right? You're conducting that environmental scan. What is going on in the market? Now we know how competitive it is for any kind of healthcare professional or any position like that. So your environmental scan on that tells you that you have a lot of competition. It also tells you, are you doing your patient surveys, right? How are your patients being served by those that are currently on your staff? And what do they need from you? It also obtains what your competitors are doing when you look at your strategic plan. And even when you look at your workforce strategy plan, what are your competitors doing? You compete with other people for positions. For instance, in an organization that I worked in, our main competition for our medical assistants in one of our sites was they got more money in an oil field. Even though they were a trained medical assistant, we couldn't keep up with the wage that they were offered to go into the oil field, not as a medical assistant, but as a worker out there. And that was a huge thing that we had to overcome within that one particular site. So when you think about what are your competitors doing, don't just think about your other healthcare competitors, but think about your other organizations, right, that are hiring possibly your staff. And then this last one down here on the lower left is obtain employee input through surveys or through stay interviews or through exit interviews. Yes, we'll talk about those also. But it's that communication piece to make sure that you're always on top. Now, when you talk about your strategic plan, it really is outline the next 5 to 7 years. We don't have 5 to 7 years to fix our workforce strategy. I'm sure a lot of you are under pressure to get people hired even yesterday, last week, 5 months ago. You might have had an opening for 18 months for a physician. You might have had an opening for a medical assistant for the last 6 months. We need to get these people hired. And so hiring is one part of it, but also it is about keeping who you have. And that's where we're going to get into the stay interviews, right? And the strategic plan also articulates your vision. And same with workforce, right? What is your vision for your workforce? What kind of culture do you want in your organization? What is really your plan? And that's where stay interviews also come into play. It always needs to be revisited, and we talk about not only the strategic plan, talk about your workforce strategy, but talk about your stay interviews. That information always has to be revisited, and it has to be set goals with your defined objectives and, more importantly, your commitment to actually make changes for your employees. So when I look at the environmental scan, just a brief little scan for Wyoming, oh my gosh, your turnover Q4, according to the Department of Labor in Health Services, is 26.9%. Now, I don't know what all health services encompasses in Wyoming, but I would imagine that if you're doing turnover and HR metrics within your own staff, you probably have 26.9%, or maybe it's higher, maybe it's lower. If it's lower, I applaud you. If it's higher, I would not be surprised. When you look at, say, your physicians, your nurse practitioners, your dentists, your PAs, your medical assistants, your dental assistants, your front desk staff, etc. What is your turnover? You need to find out if you don't already know that. Now, did you know that more than a third More than a third of all currently active positions will be 65 or older in the next decade. This is why you need to retain who you currently have, if they're a good employee. And I say that because I was in HR for years and years, right? 42% of current physicians have burnout right now. And that AI could replace 45% of the activities that people are now being paid to do. And when you think about that, 45% of the activities, and that's partly because one, technology is growing, but that also creates issues, and it will come out in the stay interview, right? How much technology is impacting their ability or desire to continue to do the work they do, because we all get frustrated with the technology we have, right? We have EMRs that don't always work. We have broadband that doesn't always work. We have some places that don't even have broadband. We have all sorts of problems with technology. So what's happening is AI is actually replacing things. And so we have to be very careful to keep the people we have, give them the tools and the skills they need to continue that job that they currently have. So how do we do that? Well, there's many, many ways, but today we're focusing on exit and stay interviews. And the reason we're doing that is that it's a simple process that doesn't cost you any money more than the time doing the interviews, right? It's not something that is a huge initiative. It's not revamping stuff. It's really a process that needs to be done. I know a medical director that actually went out and individually met with 60 of the employees, all on his medical staff. He learned so much, and I know that sounds incredibly time consuming. It was. But when you add up all the time for those interviews, you think about the time that you spend recruiting a new physician, recruiting new medical assistants, recruiting a new dentist, whoever that may be. You think about that time and expense, and maybe it's time that we look internally and make sure that we actually are keeping who we want to keep. So today we're going to talk about the difference between a stay interview and an exit interview. And I know some people know what stay interviews are, but a lot of people don't. And so I was talking with a group the other day that was 80 people. Only 2 individuals in the group of 80 did actual stay interviews. And that's why it's so important. It's kind of a hidden secret that's out there. And we're going to talk about how to actually conduct them. And most important, who should actually conduct them, and then how to gather and analyze that data. So if that sounds good, we're going to keep rocking and rolling here. So what is the difference between an exit interview and a stay interview, Ann? Well, I will tell you what the difference is. When you have exit interviews, you are gathering information on your culture. I'm not saying to stop exit interviews. They can be good. And I know NAC has a good program for getting them out also that you can subscribe to. So you're gathering information from your culture, right? You're gathering information on your benefits, on your leaders and managers' style. That's an important one because oftentimes people leave because of the leaders or the manager's style. So that's a key question to make sure that any exit interview is being asked. Focuses a little bit on the leaders and managers without calling someone very specific out, right? And then what do you need to be effective to be on track and get that information gathered? That's probably the biggest piece, is that people actually, they do the exit interview, HR or someone collects the interview, and oftentimes it just goes right into a file. Into the file cabinet, and we've done our exit interview, and nothing else happens from there. Now, that's where exit interviews fall short. You actually need to do something with the data, just like you do on the stay interview too. But make sure you're actually gathering it, and then you're working on it, because exit interviews gives you so much insight as to why people have left. They're, like I said, they're a good tool only if they're used consistently and only if you actually are using it to make changes. So it's really important that you do that. And then my screen just went crazy here. So yeah, think about that, what you're going to do with the actual exit interview, right? And if this is truth or myth, you can see my answer there right now. Your staff is getting recruited every week and every day. I can be very confident about that statement. When you think about especially your medical staff, if you ask any of your physicians or any of your dentists, they are getting recruited by all sorts of headhunters every day. They're probably getting multiple emails a day showing places that are a better place to work. Grass is always greener on the other side, right? They're getting inundated with different things. Now, even on your front desk staff, your medical assistant staff, these are highly trained individuals who are oftentimes also bilingual. They are getting recruited also. So think about, what am I going to do to keep them? Why would they want to stay with us? And it's really, really important so that you resolve the issue before people are running away from your organization. So think about that a little bit here as we go through. Now, how do you actually conduct the stay interview? We will go through the questions at the very end as to what that entails. But how do you conduct the stay interview, and who should conduct them? And why is that so important when I say that? Because they have to be a priority in all health centers. They should be. They should be in every organization, right? And then we'll talk next about who actually should do those, right? But once you collected the data from your stay interviews, you want to make sure that you always make a plan to address the issues and communicate that progress with employees. And we'll talk in more detail as to how to actually make that analysis on what you're going to work on. And don't ever promise or ask anything that you can't deliver on. And that's really important. And as we go through, I'll probably say that more than once, because it's an important piece. It's kind of like with any survey or any questionnaire, if you pose the question, people think that you're actually going to do something with that information. And if you don't, then it creates all sorts of problems from a culture and employee education standpoint. So who should do the interview? Someone who is trusted. And this is a huge piece, because you have to have someone that really has the trust of the employees. If you don't, people won't actually say something, right? You want someone who really can sit down and listen. And that goes to the next point, right? Someone who can remain objective and not get defensive of the organization. And what I mean by that is, you don't want someone so close to the organization as far as, I mean, it can be someone in your organization, that's perfectly fine. But you all kind of know who maybe is in a meeting and you bring up a challenge that you're having, and someone instantly moves to that defensive mode. That's not their fault, or this is why this happens, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what you need to avoid when you do the stay interviews. You need to have someone that can totally remain objective. So if it's the CEO, if you have a smaller organization and the CEO wants to do these, that's perfectly okay. But you have to be ready to hear things that you don't want to hear, or that you're ready to defend, and you can't. You just have to listen and ask some clarifying questions. So it has to be someone who's trusted, and again, someone who will not get defensive with the answers you receive. And that's crucial, because it sounds like kind of something that you'd automatically know, but it's truly not something that you do automatically know, right? It's one of those things that you need to be reminded of. And so when you're doing these, if it's you or if it's the manager who wants to do it with their staff, you can do that also. Just make sure that if you start defending a process or a system or a person, you need to kind of just take a deep breath and go, okay, I can't do that right now. I just need to listen. So One-on-one is best. You can certainly do a group if you want. I know that certainly sounds great as far as saving time, but you won't get as much information out of it, or maybe as accurate information. My experience has been when you work with groups, kind of focus groups, whether it be patients, you may do that, but if you're doing with staff, if you're doing a focus group kind of or a stay interview with staff, oftentimes someone or two people will be very vocal and everyone else just shakes their head and agrees with what is being said. And that may not be really what the concerns of everyone that are there actually is. Does that make sense? So think about how, if you can do them one-on-one, it's by far a best practice to do that. I would definitely have a set time. Let people know what you're doing. And that's just from my HR background. If I call someone and say, I want to have a one-on-one meeting with you, that was not always received well, shall we say. So they were concerned. So let them know, we're here, this is what we want to find out. This is why we're doing this. And I can't stress enough, and I will again a couple times, I'm sure, in that only ask things that you actually want to work on and things that you can actually get done, right? But sit down one-on-one, schedule a day or two to go through all this information and start gathering all that items. Now, when you do the stay interviews, at the end of the webinar, we do have several different questions for you. Now, I really stress that you don't want to go out and say, I listened to this webinar and I have these 10 questions and we're going to go through all of them. That's not a good idea. What you want to do is focus on 2 and maybe 3, but I'm telling you that you're going to get information back and you're going to actually have to do something with these answers. And if you don't, then you've kind of defeated the whole purpose and kind of lost trust with employees. So it is really important that you just ask 1 to 3 questions. I have on here 2 to 3, but really think about what you can actually work on, and maybe start with 1 or 2 questions this next quarter. And then maybe if you're able to make progress on those, then maybe second quarter you can ask another question or 2 or even 3, but kind of see where you're at as you go through. But it has to be very, very focused. Do not, as much as I can stress, do not send out, don't send out the questions to all the employees and say, here, answer them in writing and then send it back. That doesn't work either. But certainly don't ask all of the questions at one time. It doesn't work very well that way, right? So then how are you actually going to gather and analyze it? And this is really important because as you go through, you're going to collect the data. So make a spreadsheet or some way, identify columns works really well. So if someone is having problems with tools or culture or management style or policies or like mindfulness or time off or balance with work and life, you might want to make columns in your spreadsheet, and those will flush out as you go, right? You can put the name down and you can check kind of where their answer fell, so that ultimately in the end, when say you have, I don't know, 25 or if you have a smaller team, then whatever your team is, right? But once you have those in the spreadsheet, and if you have a payroll system or an HR system of some type, you can certainly run a employee list and just put it in Excel and add these columns at the top, and I'm telling you, it'll make a world of difference. Because once you start collecting the data, putting the check mark what's coming back as feedback, right? Then at the end, you really have a good idea. Okay, so we have this many individuals, this is our percentage that think we need to work on culture. This is our percentage that think we need to work on the tools that they need to do their job, etc. So it gives you a real data-driven model to go from, and it helps you identify those trends. And from that, then you'll actually identify a plan as to how to actually tackle it. And that's really crucial, because if you don't have a plan, it won't get fixed. And you want to make sure that you're always developing that plan and have input from employees as to what you can do. And you will get that from the stay interviews. Now, when you actually analyze that data, right? I like this formula. You can do whatever you want to say. If you're getting great responses to some of the questions and everybody's 100%, or on your exit interviews even, you can apply this to a number of different things. But if you're at 85% or above, whether it's your staff satisfaction survey or something like that, 85% or above is pretty darn good. And so in that sense, you would take whatever that metric is, right, and say, okay, we're doing really well on this. What do we need to do to continue just being good in that area, right? And if you have something in your stay interviews, exit interviews, or your staff satisfaction surveys that's like 70%, or you can even bump that to 75, that needs attention. And you need to pay attention to that number, and you need to continue to try to get that into the green. So it's just the same kind of thing that we're doing with our CQI projects, PCMH, whatever it is that we're working on. There's no reason that you shouldn't have these also for your workforce strategy sessions. And then your red. Red needs immediate attention. Anything below 70% for sure needs immediate attention. You need to look at your policy, if it's policy driven, if it's culture driven, if it's by your manager that's driven. Maybe you need to improve that manager's communication style, or change out that manager, whatever it is, that needs immediate correction. If you have enough people telling you that there's a problem in this one particular area, that's what you need to do. So what should you be asking? And this is really important, because again, though, you only want to ask what you're willing to work on. And so as we go through these questions, and if you want to, you're more than welcome to write them down, but I will be sending a document off to Courtney, who can email everyone who registered for the program, a list of these same questions. So now, I would love it if a couple of you would just kind of answer this first question. Can you unmute us, Courtney? I'm not sure if she can, but so one question, ask yourself this and just kind of answer it in your own head, right? We all can think about these things, right? If you had a magic wand and you waved it, what would you change?
And I am here, sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right. So can anyone think of anything that they would change? I see a few people on here. You're unmuted, so if you say something, that would be great. All right, I guess people are not going to participate yet, but at the end we'll have questions. But think about that. And isn't that a powerful question? When you go into work each day, if you had a magic wand and you waved it, what would you change? And I think that it doesn't matter what position you hold within the organization. We all have things that we would like to see changed. And sometimes there's things that we can't change, and sometimes there's things that we certainly could, and make things easier for all employees, right? How could we help you do your best work? When you think of that question, boy, I can think of 1,000 things that at the time would help me to do my best work. And so that's why it's important. As you can see, these questions are large. They're big questions. You don't want to be asking all of them on this page, in one sitting. You're going to have way too much information. So how can we help you do your best work? What tools would you like that you don't currently have? Now, that could be a very expensive question to be asking. And again, make sure that if you're asking the question, maybe you're collecting the information. If you're talking with medical or your radiology department or your dental department, right? They probably have tools that are very, very expensive that they would like. But that might be part of your strategic plan. You might be able to ask them, what do you not have that you'd like? And we can at least make a plan in the next few years to be able to accumulate that or find a way to maybe make that happen. Not committing to it, but certainly taking a look at that and seeing if there's something that you can do. But again, these questions are very loaded, so you want to be very, very careful that you don't ask too many of them. So what in the last 3 months have frustrated you the most at work? And I can think of many things that were small things in my different positions over the years, of little things that really frustrated me. And oftentimes it was very simple fix, but it was something that, I guess because it was so simple, we just never took time to fix it, right? It's kind of like anything else in your home or anything else, right? Sometimes you live without that light bulb being changed because you just don't have time to do it, or you just don't, it doesn't bother you until someone comes over and they're like, why haven't you changed the light bulb? Right? That's the same kind of thing. What is it that frustrates you? And oftentimes you'll find that those are very, very simple fixes, and it really wouldn't take much to fix their frustration. And what does a great day at work look like to you? And so it may be that patients are seen on time. It may be that our system doesn't go down. It may be that everybody comes to work on time. And again, so once you're gathering that information, right, if they say, well, it'd be really nice if my staff could come in on time, then you have something to go look at and say, okay, do I have a problem with attendance in this one particular area? And you may or may not, right? But it gives you something then to go work on. And where it might be that a great day at work looks like when our full team is here, or when we have one of our dental people over in our medical area. And so how do you make that happen more often? Or how do you maybe change things in your actual systems and processes to fix that? You want to make sure that everyone's having a great day at work the majority of the time, right? I won't say every single day, but the majority of time you want people to feel like they've accomplished something and they're able to leave work with a smile on their face, that they were able to get something done, right? So what makes you feel proud to work here besides the mission? And that's really important, because we're all in a very mission-driven organizations, and we've relied on that for years and years. Those of us that have been around community health or migrant health or any kind of healthcare, we've relied on that mission forever. And it is a very important part of who we are. But as people are coming into the workforce, now there's a lot of things to care about. And even if you, you watch Facebook feeds, LinkedIn feeds, there's a lot of nonprofits out there. There's a lot of ways that you can give back to the community that you couldn't do 30 years ago, right? There's a lot of ways that things have changed, and how people can fuel that mission by not working in a health center. And so we want to take kind of that mission and set it aside for a moment and say, what else makes you proud to work here? And that's what we need to focus on, because the mission will always be there. And but people can fulfill that mission side of them in other places. We don't want them to, at all, but they can. And so we need to tap into what else makes them proud to work here, right? What skills do you have that we haven't made the most of? That's a powerful question, because oftentimes our staff has many skills that we aren't even aware of. And, let alone speak to physicians, dentists, pharmacists, any kind of professional. They may have all sorts of skills that they've learned in school or in residency that we're not tapping into. And that's really key. And then there's just things that our staff might be able to do. Maybe someone really likes to do graphic design and that they enjoy that, or they enjoy photography. Tap them to then take photos of your facilities. Tap them to do the memes on social media about your health center. Tap them because it makes them feel good. They're contributing something that's a little bit in addition to what they would normally do in their job. And it's also a recognition of a skill that they have that honestly we haven't made the most of. Or it might be that someone is able to translate materials. That's a whole other thing. You got to make sure they really can. But can they translate? Do they want to do some training in your organization? Do they like helping with interviews? Do they like giving tours around your clinic? Think about what other skills do they have? We all have them. And oftentimes our employers just kind of overlook them or don't even know they exist, right? So what makes you want to come to work? And that's a crucial thing, because when you look at it, 99%, I would guarantee, 99% of everyone that's working at your organization, well, one, they applied, right? So they wanted to work there. Two, they actually came to work, and I can guarantee that most of them were pretty excited to be there. And 99% of them thought that this could be a job that they could have for a while. I'm not going to say a long time anymore. That's not necessarily realistic, but 99% of them wanted to come work for you. So oftentimes, though, when we look at our turnover number, something happened between that first day and when someone left. And this is a crucial question to bridge that gap. What makes you want to come to work? And so think about, and even think about it as yourself. If you're driving, you're sitting in your office, you're wherever you are right now on this webinar, think about what it is that makes you want to come to work. Now, I will say, if it's the mission, I applaud you. I totally applaud you. It's why I loved my job at a community health center, a migrant health center. Loved it because of the mission. And was that a strong thing to get me to come to work? Yes. But there was also things that if everything else was dysfunctional, I probably wouldn't have only stayed for the mission. And that's the point. Take the mission out of it because it is such an important piece. Take it out of it and say, what makes me want to come to work? And ask people what makes them want to come to work. Because if your organization is not running smoothly, or if there's complete dysfunction, the mission is not going to keep them there. And that's why you have to separate that out and look at what makes people want to come to work, and use the mission as the bonus, right? So how have you contributed to the environment that exists here now? I think this is a really important question, because especially if you're having maybe difficulty with teamwork, or you're having difficulty with kind of some dysfunction, or if you have a really outstanding team, ask them, how have they contributed to the environment that exists here? Because the reality of it is, not any of us as one person can change the environment. We can change the people out, but certainly each person contributes to the environment. Now you may, as a CEO, as a leader of your organization or a leader of a team, you set that standard. So in that sense, that one person does have a huge impact upon it. But it's important for our employees to remember that they contribute to it too. It's not just the CEO's job to make the environment perfect. It's how everyone interacts during the day that actually makes that environment or that culture a good place to come to work, right? And that's up to each one of us. And then, what are your suggestions on how to improve? And this could be your culture, your teamwork, your tools, the way patients are scheduled, your EMR. It could be a number of different things. But that's why it's really important to think about and not take more than one or two questions. And I think that you probably got that impression as you have been listening to this, right? That we don't want to have all these questions asked at once. And so therefore, I would strongly suggest you don't do that. Now, instead of just crossing your fingers and hoping things will change, right? You do need to take action. So remember, it is a strategy. It is not a one-time initiative. It can't be solved overnight. But remember to be collecting your X interviews. If you're doing that currently, I would encourage you still do that. But remember, at that point, that person has chosen to leave. The likelihood of them coming back is pretty unlikely. Or of you retaining them at that point. Once they've made that decision, you're not going to be able to probably change their mind. So that's one thing. But second of all, oftentimes I have seen people leave organizations and then come back, and that can be wonderful for your organization because they kind of went over and saw the other side of the world, and it didn't work out that way. So that great, so they came back, and those people can be huge for retention. And then also identify the best person to conduct the stay interviews. And that is really key because oftentimes if you don't, you can't figure out really, I have to put myself here on mute for just a second. Now I can't figure out how to unmute. Now I'm back. All right. So when you think about that, but really identify the best person. Do not identify, like I said, someone who gets defensive, someone who wants to not really see things move forward or improve, but think about someone who you really trust. In our organization, there was several people, but there was one particular person that was kind of just had that personality, that we could trust him and that he could really solicit information out of people. And that's the kind of person that you want. So, and again, only ask 1 to 2 questions that you want to work on. Don't ask a ton, and maybe only 1 this quarter, right? Compile all your results, put them in a spreadsheet, kind of come up with trends, check them off, add it up at the end, and then take action on that. And that's why it's so important, because if you don't take action, again, don't ask. But if you're committed to taking the action with that, it's really, really crucial. And you will get a lot of information and a lot of, and you can find other stay interview questions. These are the ones that I particularly like. But it's really important to just ask people, and you'll be surprised at how surprised people are that you're even asking the question, and that you actually care enough to ask the question. So with that, let's open up the lines and start a conversation. Is there anyone here that has done stay interviews? I can't hear anyone here.
Hey guys, this is Courtney Hasha. Please don't hesitate to ask some questions. We do have a chat box. Also, don't forget that you may be on mute still. I am not controlling your mute at this time. I am leaving it up to you whether or not you want to be muted or not. Please speak close and loudly into your microphone so that we can all hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. Has anyone done stay interviews or had a stay interview asked of them?
And this is Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
Hey, so I have to answer no and no, which I find very interesting. But I wanted to ask you a question. If we don't get any positives on that, and if I missed it and you mentioned it in the presentation, I apologize. You mentioned at one point you might do them as a group, a stay interview as a group. And do you actually ask that question to the group out loud and they reply out loud, or do they reply in writing? I mean, group dynamics can sometimes make something go haywire a little bit. It can also make a much richer conversation. I just don't know if you control for that variable.
Yes, I think, Brenda, you bring up a good point. The best practice is to do them one-on-one. That would be the best practice. Some people think that it's more efficient to do it as a group. Now, I agree with you. Group dynamics can be very difficult, and usually there's one or two people that drive that conversation, and the rest are not heard. And that's why one-on-ones is definitely best. Some of those questions could probably be asked as a group. I don't know that I would, the whole point of the stay interview questions, could you send it out and have them respond? You could, but the whole idea is have that conversation and make it more of a personal, like if I sat down with you, Brenda, and said, what tools do you need to make your job better? It would hold a lot more weight that I'm actually personally talking to you versus I'm sending you a form. We get plenty of forms within our organizations, right? I'm sending you a form, please fill it out, send it in. And people are very hesitant to do that. One, they don't know what's going to be done with that form, right? They're hesitant, they don't know where that form is going to go. And the worst thing is that if you don't do anything after you said that, please let us know what tools you need, and they send you the form, and they're thinking they've made a request now for that, and you haven't delivered. So that can backfire on you real quick. So I think having a one-on-one conversation, explaining why you're going to do a stay interview, what you're hoping to gain, and what insight you'd like to have from the employee, and then actually showing that you're willing to follow up with it, is a gold mine that is not tapped right now within many organizations.
Wow. Thank you, Ann. That was very helpful and a great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? I see Juanita, Jamie, Kathy. Juanita, you're not muted, and do you have any questions? How about you, Jamie?
No, I don't, but as listening in, it's interesting because I work in provider relations, and so oftentimes I hear folks, hey, we're looking for a nurse, hey, we're looking for this, hey, we're looking for that. Do you know of anything in your travels? And of course, if I do or don't, I just, the person can contact them. I don't get involved, but I like the fact of the stay interview. It's good. It helps build up what's lacking or what you would like to see as your next goal, or it brings that whole continuity together, and I really like that concept. Thank you.
And
this has been interesting.
Thank you, Jamie. And as you know, if you're doing provider relations and people are maybe asking you about what's available or letting you know that they're going to soon be available, oftentimes that's due to culture. And so we have to really think back on what did we promise this employee when they came to work for us, and really have we delivered on that? Because sometimes we get a little bit lax, I guess, in actually continually improving, especially the culture. And I know we're all like super, super busy. We got many patients to see. We got all sorts of things to do. But the reality of it is your workforce strategy has to be really a high priority. We're not going to be able to just replace people like we were, say a few years ago. That just doesn't happen. And when you look at Wyoming's unemployment rate, when you look at the health services turnover rate that I gave you earlier, when you look at your own turnover rate, it's something that we just have not placed enough value on. And so the stay interviews can really help you kind of focus on where to, because really in reality, workforce strategy is huge and it's very, very broad. And that's probably why oftentimes we just kind of don't want to kind of tackle it, right? It's in some ways it's not buying a piece of equipment and plugging it in and hoping it works and having IT fix it when it doesn't, right? It's not that way. These are people, and so it's a little bit more intimidating. But if we start small, and if people feel like we actually care, then and they see results from their input, it makes a world of difference. And they won't be letting Jamie know that they're looking for other jobs, or that if she hears of anything, let me know. And she also probably has been in different organizations then, and kind of even probably has the ones that she'd be like, oh, I wouldn't work there, or I would like to work over here. She probably has a whole bunch of information regarding that. But the point is that you all have the opportunity to make your organization stand out when it comes to, being that employer of choice in your area.
I did have one.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I just saw the raise my hand. I had one other thing. Demographics is huge in Wyoming. Wyoming is an expensive state to live in. I think we all have seen real estate prices, and I was listening to I listened to several podcasts, Zooms, things like that, and it's about bringing them back to our state and giving them these opportunities to bring the kids back. But when I go circle back to demographics, I live in Fremont County. It's a busy county, can be very transient at times. As you know, Riverton has lost a few businesses, but we're on the rebound with some new ones. And then we also have the reservation, and I work real closely with. But in general, demographics is always something to bring into the picture of how are we going to keep them here and what did we promise them?
Right. And it may be, when you do the stay interviews, and again, you can certainly find other stay interviews, or if I find some, I'll send them off to Courtney and she can distribute them all to you. But really, you might ask those really difficult positions to recruit, what else, before someone else offers them a relocation package and $50,000 more per year. Is there something that you could possibly do to continue to retain them? The one thing that I've heard that really works well, and I know some people that have actually done it and taken advantage of it, is do you look at, say, especially on the provider level, right? What they want is time. And so could you say every 5 years, after they've completed 5 years of service, could you give them additional time off for, say, a sabbatical? Not for an exorbitant amount of time, but in reality, if they leave, you're going to have an opening for about 18 months, probably, if you're lucky. And so is it really going to kill the organization if maybe every 5 years or every 3 years, you gave them an extra 3 weeks to do whatever they wanted to and really gave them that sabbatical time. Or if they wanted to focus on distance learning, maybe they want to learn a new skill or something like that, you can certainly help them accomplish that so they don't have to live near a major metropolitan area. So there's a lot of ways to combat that. And actually, I'm pretty sure that Hannah and I did a webinar on that, I want to say last year. And so we can certainly pull that back up, I'm sure. I'm committing Courtney to accessing and finding that. And if not, we can find some other information to send to employees or send to you all on that particular issue. But I know that Hannah had a lot of information on that previously, and I'm sure Courtney has that also. Any other questions, thoughts? No? All right, well, one more thing, because I know there's someone on here that needs to get credit as an HR professional if they have certification. SHRM does issue a credit. I don't know if other places may take it if you're a social worker or something like that, maybe as a general credit or something like that. But it certainly is good for human resource people, and they know exactly what I'm talking about when I say a SHRM credit. The number is 19-927-US. It's eligible for 1 credit, and so you can use that code to put in there. If you have any questions, if you need any information, please contact Courtney, or you can feel free to contact me also. And I'll apologize for my mute, but sometimes technical difficulties are such that you need to address something quickly before the system doesn't care for you any longer. So I apologize for that. But and if you're listening to this replay, just make sure that you feel free that you can contact us with any questions at all. So any other last minute questions? We've got just like a minute left or 2 minutes left. Any other thoughts, or was this helpful? Any feedback would be great.
Anne, I have a question for you. I thought it was very interesting that you kind of emphasized that the mission is not necessarily a retention tool, but what are your feelings on it as a recruiting tool?
Oh, yes, I feel that's true, and I apologize. I just changed the thing somehow. I was trying to get to the chat. Yes, I think that I think it's both. I don't want to say that it, but I worked in health centers, and I think several people have been there for a significant amount of time, and I love health centers. I think the mission is the world, but in this day and age, with people that you're recruiting now, they can give in many different ways. They can satisfy that mission part of their body or of their soul. And so you can't, as a health center, count on only that. You have to have a good culture. You have to have all these other things. And you need to find out what makes them want to come to work besides the mission. Because like I said, they can get their mission fulfilled in many different ways. Now, do I think that they should do it at a community health center? Absolutely, I do, without a doubt. But, I mean, you can see people rescue dogs, they save the planet, they, recycle, they have safe products. I mean, there's just so many things that people can get involved with today. And they could do that before also, but not as easily. Now it's very easy to feel like I'm fulfilling my mission, even on Facebook or LinkedIn groups or something like that, that you have to be careful. Don't rely on that as your sole area.
Great, thank you.
Use it, but don't rely on it.
And then can I just ask one more? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
So you had mentioned, conducting stay interviews with existing staff. How often do people use external parties to conduct stay interviews? And then what recommendations would you have for that?
Again, I would say that if you use external or internal, the only reason I wouldn't use an internal staff, because I think it's best actually coming from internal staff, honestly, is that if your organization's struggling, then I think that probably it's best to have somebody come in from the outside. But if you have an organization that functions fairly well, of course everybody has issues, right? And you have that person, more important than anything is the person who conducts the interviews needs to be, again, someone that they can trust, someone that can get people to talk and not become defensive, and kind of narrow the conversation down so it's actually actionable items that you can actually take action on, if that makes sense. So that would be the only reason I think that if you don't have that person in-house, and that it can be the CEO, you just have to be careful that you're not that you don't get defensive. You have to just listen.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I would not do it in writing. I would not. Exit interviews are a whole different thing. Stay interviews need to be done, through a conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anne, for all of your insight and your time. That does bring us a little past the hour, so I do want to be respectful of everyone's time today, and thank you so much for participating. I know there's a few of you left on here. Those documents that Anne mentioned, as soon as I get them, I'll be sending them your way. They may even come through Kathy here as well. And then keep in mind, there's a little survey gonna head your way. We would really love if you could take the time to fill that out and help us make these events even better.
Yes, and thank you, Wyoming PCA. Thank you for having me and for providing this for your members. This is awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
All right. Bye.